It has spent 2.5 years before the standing committee. Thereafter, it has spent dozens and dozens of meetings of empowered committee of finance ministers under 3 different finance ministers and 4 different chairpersons. After that, if we want to delay it, I would suggest no purpose would be served.
I stand here to support GST. This is an important taxation. I welcome GST, but not your bill. Bill will have to undergo more changes.
Attempt of sending it to the standing committee was not to delay the bill. It was only on propriety that we were insisting.
We are supporting, and also we are waiting. Since we are very happy to see your smiling face, we will also smile when we will get our dues amount.
The Finance Minister Arun Jaitley urges the opposition not to send the GST bill to a standing committee, arguing that it will delay the rollout by at least another year. This after the Lok Sabha Speaker refuses to give in to the opposition's demand of referring the bill to a parliamentary standing panel.
The GST bill may be moving a step closer to reality, but no such luck for the real estate regulator bill after a united opposition forces the government to withdraw that bill from the Rajya Sa.
With effect from 1st April 2015, we've amended the law. So for the future, the problem doesn't exist. It's a past issue.
Arun Jaitley reiterates the government stand that FPIs will have to pay MAT for financial year till 2015, even as the Bombay High Court stays the IT department's tax demand raised on Aberdeen Global Emerging Markets.
Volatility haunts the Wall Street again. Benchmark indices trade in a narrow range, finally end in the red. The Nifty ends flat, holding on to 8,300, while the Sensex loses 50 points. Power and bank stocks see selling, but metals and energy shares see support.
International crude prices spike on reports of protesters shutting down the eastern Libyan oil port. The Saudi oil minister tells CNBC only Allah knows where global crude prices are headed.
Kotak Mahindra Bank beats estimates with a near 30% rise in profit, 16% jump in net interest income. Asset quality shows marginal improvement, with gross NPAs falling to 1.85%. Bank announces a 1:1 bonus issue.
The Competition Commission of India gives e-commerce majors like Flipkart and Amazon a clean sheet. The competition watchdog says deep discounts do not lead or mean cartelization.
The government assures Parliament it will ensure non-discriminatory internet access to all after the opposition corners it in Parliament. The board members of Housing.com convinced Rahul Yadav, the CEO, to withdraw his resignation within 24 hours of submitting it. Yadav apologizes, says he's willing to stay back. First, the unseasonal rains and then indifferent insurance companies have left the wheat farmers of Uttar Pradesh high and dry. We'll get you a ground report on India Business Hour. Well, let's go straight to the top story tonight. The GST, the Goods and Services Tax, has just moved a step closer to reality. This after the Lok Sabha took up the Constitutional Amendment Bill for discussion today, and it's likely to be passed in the lower house of Parliament tomorrow. And while the importance of this landmark legislation is not lost on anyone, the opposition parties are not in a mood to give up just yet. This after the Lok Sabha Speaker refused to refer the bill to a standing committee. The Congress and the CPIM continue to demand that the bill be referred to a standing committee, a move that the government is certainly not going to consider. Former Union Minister Veerappa Moily, while maintaining that the Congress is in favour of Goods and Services Tax, believes that the current bill requires major changes and those should be vetted by a standing committee. The Finance Minister maintains that any further delay will serve no purpose and will in fact hurt the states and delay the implementation of the Goods and Services Tax by at least a year. Here's a CNBC TV 18 exclusive interview. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says that India has the potential to clock double-digit growth, but that would entail an increased investment in rural infrastructure, irrigation. He was speaking exclusively to CNBC on the sidelines of the Asian Development Bank's annual meeting in Baku in Azerbaijan. On the issue of MAT, the Finance Minister said that the MAT tussle was a legacy issue, also added that they had amended the law with effect from the 1st of April 2015, so it's prospective. They cannot do anything about it retrospectively.
I do believe that India has a 9 or a 10% growth potential. And a 9 or a 10% growth potential, to achieve that, we have to invest a lot into rural infrastructure and irrigation. That's one area we can move up. Our services sector is doing well. The third area where we have a lot of investment to make is our infrastructure and the impact of that on our manufacturing sector. It's only then that we achieve the 9%, 10% growth rate, and once we are able to do it for a decade or so, we can lower poverty rates. It's only then that I'll feel excited about it. We had undertaken that the present government does not believe in retrospective taxation. We have not enacted any such law. No new notices underlined under the earlier retrospective legislations will be issued unless a procedure is followed. Not a single notice has been issued. Obviously, problems will come up because at the end of the day, people are very comfortable not paying taxes. So I have said the policy of the government is taxes payable are payable, taxes not payable are not payable. For us in the present government, this is a legacy issue. Because when they represented to me, with effects from 1st April 2015, we've amended the law. So for the future, the problem doesn't exist, it's a past issue. With regard to the past, it's in a court, and we are awaiting a court verdict, that's all. And the government went to the court along with the Council for the Financial Institutions and said we want an early hearing of the case and we'd like it to be disposed of fast so that this issue is resolved as quickly as possible.
Well, MAT is a legacy issue, says the finance minister there, also saying very clearly that it is not something that they can address at this point in time. Of course, we are going to be taking that story forward with the development of the day. The Bombay High Court has stayed the minimum alternate tax order that was issued to Aberdeen Global Emerging Markets by the Tax Department. However, this cannot be construed as relief for all MAT cases, and here's why. Aberdeen has received relief on technical grounds. Prerna joins us now to explain what this means. Prerna, take us. Well, we'll get to Prerna in just a bit, but we understand that Aberdeen has moved the Bombay High Court today seeking interim relief as the time limit to file appeal against the MAT notice expires tomorrow. A stay has been granted on technical grounds, which means that the Income Tax Department directly issued a final assessment order to Aberdeen instead of a draft order first. The Bombay High Court has asked the IT Department to submit a reply on the 18th of June. So we understand that Aberdeen stands on different grounds and the interim relief to Aberdeen cannot be construed as relief for all other MAT cases pending before the High Court, because in all other cases the Revenue Department has served draft assessment orders. Currently, 5 FPIs have challenged the IT Department's MAT orders. The FPIs include BNP Paribas, National Westminster PLC and its 3 depository of funds. We will have to wait and watch on these cases as the matter is expected to come up for hearing tomorrow. Well, now let's listen into some of the experts that we've been speaking to and what they make of this development.
The Bombay High Court heard the matter, and one of the objections before the Bombay High Court was that instead of passing a draft order as is required under Section 144C of the Income Tax Act, a final order was served on Aberdeen. Just to explain that simply, in the case of a foreign company or where there is a transfer pricing adjustment, the law mandates that a tax officer would have to pass a draft order. And unless the SSE chooses not to object to that within 30 days, a final order cannot be passed because the draft order can be challenged before a dispute resolution panel. From what I am given to understand, apparently that process was not followed in the case of Aberdeen.
Like most other FIIs or unlike all other FIIs, I guess, Aberdeen seems to have been issued a final assessment order instead of a draft assessment order, and that is what it challenged in the High Court. And while I haven't seen the order of the High Court either, it is possible that what the High Court has done is effectively stayed the final order and might direct the Tax Department to allow for Aberdeen to be able to access the remedies that it should have been able to access had a draft order been issued rather than a final order.
Well, reactions there coming into the interim relief that has been provided by the Bombay High Court to Aberdeen Asset Management. Joining us now to talk about this case is Porus Kaka, the Counsel for Aberdeen Global Emerging Markets. Porus, appreciate you joining us. Perhaps it would be a bit of an overstatement to suggest that this is a setback for the government at this point in time. What was your prayer in court today, and where do we go from here?
Well, Not really specifically, but yes, certainly the prayer was ultimately against the MAT levy. But the relief that ultimately that the court was more persuaded with was the fact that even the procedure for implementing the levy has not been followed. The wider grounds are still there, the petition is there, but currently the relief was granted on the issue that the procedure itself, which allows us to challenge, was not followed.
Right, sir. Ashmit here. Just to look at the broader issue of as far as the MAT levy is concerned, we just in fact played out the reactions coming in from the finance minister himself. A very, very clear message being sent out that the MAT exemption will be prospective from this point on, that the MAT dues have to be paid, that India is not a tax haven, that application of law cuts both ways. So again, some very stern comments coming in from North Block. If we can just have your thoughts on what it means as far as FPI participation and the tax dues that they're potentially looking at.
Well, I think to be fair for what comments I heard from the finance minister, I think he was very clear that it was his view that currently the provisions ought not to apply, and he has legislated upon that. As far as the past, I think all he has said is that he has left it to the courts. Now, if the view is that it ought not to apply, I think certainly that aspect itself could be useful. So I don't believe that it's a certainty that it's his view that for the past you have to pay the tax and for the future you do not have to pay the tax. I think the difference in the nuance is, for the past you have to settle it through the courts. For the future, we have taken care of it in the legislation itself.
Fair enough. So on the question of course, this MAT levy, we have seen the government also looking to firefight, looking to, of course, douse the fire that has been again raised with respect to tax terrorism. That's the term been used. But the government has sought to clarify that as far as money flowing in through DTA routes are concerned, those are areas where the treaty benefits will prevail. How are you looking at it? Are you drawing any confidence as far as this MAT levy issue is concerned from this clarification coming from the government?
Well, certainly I think all those who come through treaty countries, you must remember that was only a clarification given on a call. I have yet to see an official circular on this, but as a matter of law, I think that's the correct view, that once you come through a treaty country, certainly the provisions would override anything in the Income Tax Act to the contrary, and that would include a MAT levy. So to that extent, there is a great relief, but that still leaves a basket outside, and a basket outside in the past, which will now have to go through the courts to settle this issue.
Fair enough. So speaking of going through the courts, of course, the one aspect that the government appears to be relying on, that's the AAR ruling back of 2012. That's speaking of Castleton. Of course, that matter as we speak is sub judice before the Apex Court. We expect more clarity from the Apex Court. As of now, one, what are the cues that you're looking for, one? And the second part is, would it be fair to expect the tax department to perhaps put the assessments, the ongoing assessments, put the demands on hold unless and until we have more clarity, until and unless we find the Supreme Court laying down the law of the land?
Well, I think I'm not sure whether they would make a statement that they would not press the demands. That's really for the officers in the revenue to take. But if, for example, Castleton is coming up in the not too distant future, then perhaps some via media where people do not have to pay, especially where funds have closed, ought to be found in the litigation as a matter of interim solution till the matter is decided. But as far as Castleton goes, I have said this earlier, I believe too much emphasis was being laid on that. That case could be decided on the treaty issue alone without deciding the MAT issue. And that could create problems for all those FIIs coming through non-treaty countries. So we would still have to look at a case of an FII coming through a non-treaty jurisdiction or a treaty jurisdiction other than Mauritius, Singapore, etc., which does not allow the levy of capital gains, etc., and then pursue those appeals separately.
You're absolutely right, Boris. This isn't a done deal yet by a long shot. We are, of course, awaiting what the Bombay High Court has to say. This matter is going to be taken up in June, and specifically on the Castleton matter, that matter, of course, in the Supreme Court. Boris Kaka, always a pleasure speaking with you. Many thanks for joining us. Ashmit, thanks very much for joining us as well. Speaking of clarifications, the government has gone ahead and issued a clarification on an amendment to the finance bill which levies a tax on the subsidies and other financial benefits given by the government to individuals and companies. The finance ministry has clarified that individuals will not have to pay any tax on the direct subsidy transfer on LPG and any other social welfare schemes. Corporates, though, will have to pay a tax on the monetary benefits it gets from the government. Remember, CNBC TV 18 was the first channel to point out that the government has amended the finance bill to bring in such a clause. In fact, we were joking about it just last evening on whether the LPG scheme would now be taxable as far as the consumer is concerned with this amendment being put forth in the finance bill. But getting back to the other top story, we are getting a step closer to the goods and services tax. Rajiv Dimri, leader of indirect tax at BMR and Associates, joins us now. Rajiv, appreciate you joining us on CNBC TV 18. It looks like tomorrow we are going to see the goods and services tax bill being passed by the lower house of parliament. Most parties have come out in support of the bill, including the BJD, the Shiv Sena, the NCP and even the TMC. The Congress says that it supports the GST, but it doesn't support this version of the bill. But the big question now is about the revenue neutral rate. Today, every party made it clear that anything close to 25 to 27% would be unviable. In fact, Supriya Sule of the NCP calling it a ridiculous rate. I know it's not directly connected to the constitutional amendment bill, but is this going to be a serious cause of concern, the high possible rate of GST?
Well, I agree that the high GST rate would be detrimental and therefore the rate has to be more measured than the high rate of 25-27%. However, when it comes to the Constitution Amendment Bill, the bill itself is only the framework for introduction of GST. The debate on revenue neutral rate will happen when the actual GST law at the federal and at the state level is being passed. So while it is a valid concern, and therefore ought to be discussed, but I don't think that factor alone should decide whether the Constitution Amendment Bill should go through or not.
Right. Concerns also being raised, Rajiv, today about the dual administration of tax, and these are concerns that we've spoken about in the past as well. Will the benefits of simplified GST regime be negated because of this dual administration?
I think this is a very, very important issue. And if you recall, Shireen, at the beginning of this whole concept, there was to be a supreme power with the GST Council, with veto, which became politically unacceptable. We do need somewhat of a body that has the ability to dictate terms or to make decisions, because what we absolutely cannot have is one agency taking the interpretation in another way and another agency taking a different way, because that will simply not work. So yes, that is a huge issue, and whether it requires empowering the GST Council, because that's the only viable solution. We've already made the concessions in the process of building up this consensus amongst the states, but yes, that is a very, very big issue in the overall scheme and the design of GST.
Right. One of the other concerns raised by several parties in Parliament today was the inability of state governments to impose a tax on tobacco and tobacco products. The TMC, the BJD, the NCP, just about every party spoke about the state government's inability to levy additional taxes. If the government were to make a compromise on this front, we don't know whether they will or not. If any further concessions were to be made, would it only complicate matters further?
I think let's take it at a conceptual level that if, one of the big reasons for contemplating and looking forward to GST is that it simplifies things from plethora of taxes. It brings it down to more coordinated approach to indirect taxes or consumption taxes. If the states will have the ability to start introducing new taxes or taxes on different aspects, the fear of the industry is that over a period of time, will it go uncontrolled and unchecked when there is no constitutional provision to prevent them, or a GST Council provision to prevent them. And therefore, the larger fear is that over time, will this unravel itself in a way that is not desired? Will states, in addition to GST, start picking and choosing things and start applying taxes, tobacco being one area where it is being discussed. But I don't think the debate gets limited at tobacco itself. It's the core concept that having gone so far in introducing GST, which will have its own transition issues, are we really solving the problem, or will we leave aside issues that can come back and become bigger?
Well, that's right. But Rajiv, the government is hopeful of passing the bill tomorrow in the Lok Sabha. The finance minister said that if the bill were to get delayed any further, then it could be very hard to meet the April 1, 2016 deadline. Do you believe that, we are likely to meet that deadline because state governments will now need to ratify the bill individually within their own assemblies? Do you believe an April 1 rollout still looks feasible, looks doable?
If the bill not only in Lok Sabha but also through the Rajya Sa gets passed before May 13th, while there is a process of ratification and all of those things, if the authorities, the central and state agencies, are very quickly able to come out with draft laws, draft rules, I think April 1 is still a feasible deadline. Like I said, the key requirement is that the states, as soon as the bill gets passed by the parliament, must come out with all the information as much as they can share. And therefore, there is still a possible chance for April 16th, and I think it's a good chance. If this process doesn't get completed between Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha by May 13th, then I think April 1 will look challenging.
All right, Rajiv Dimri, we'll have to leave it there. The Lok Sabha likely to pass the Goods and Services Tax Constitutional Amendment Bill tomorrow, and then it will be to the Rajya Sabha, and we're hoping that perhaps both houses will pass the bill before the 13th of May to ensure that we actually see the GST being rolled out on the 1st of April. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18. While the government may have had the upper hand in the Lok Sabha, with the Speaker refusing to give in to the opposition's demand on the constitutional bill for the GST, it had no such luck in the upper house of Parliament when the real estate regulation bill came up for discussion, so much so that the Parliamentary Affairs Minister Venkaiah Naidu had to withdraw the bill, saying the discussion process is on. The government will decide on when to table the bill for discussion and passage at a future date. Essentially, what they've now decided to do is send the bill to a select committee. Listen in.
As a matter of abundant caution, the bill has been carried forward for today's business. The consultation process is on. I'll be able to complete in a day or two, and then I'll come to the House, and I'll keep the sentiments of the House in mind of maximum number of readers who are suggesting that should be referred to select committee. I have that in my mind. I will act accordingly, sir. Once I complete the consultation process, then I'll come back to the House.
Lakhs of people have been taken for a ride by fly-by-night operators. But at the same time, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The industry cannot be killed. So industry has expressed certain apprehensions, so we need to speak to them. They want to depose before the committee. So I think there is no harm if a couple of months is spent looking at all the details of the bill, so that a very comprehensive bill comes before the Parliament.
So just like we saw the insurance being sent to a select panel and not a standing committee, we now understand that the real estate regulatory bill will be sent to a select panel as well. But news coming in on the succession plan at Cipla, the Hamid family is keen to take a united stand on all crucial decisions pertaining to the company. The family has proposed a new structure to the market regulator, which states that the promoter family will vote jointly as a single unit. Menka joins us now with the details. Menka, I understand that informal guidance has been sought by Cipla's promoters from the market regulator. What more do you have for us?
Well, that's exactly what's happened, Shireen. There is a family agreement that the Hamid family has proposed. They've reached out to SEBI asking if terms of that family agreement in fact trigger an open offer under the Takeover Code, and whether they can avail of the standard exemptions under the Takeover Code that are given out in terms of promoter transfers. SEBI, and here let me play spoiler and give you the response from SEBI up front. SEBI has said yes, the terms of the family agreement would trigger the Takeover Code because they do cross certain specific thresholds. But since this is within promoters and these are all declared promoters or part of the same promoter group, therefore they can avail of the exemption under the Takeover Code. So if this family agreement were to ever get finalized, it would not trigger an open offer. So that's the material part of what this means from an investor point of view, and that's taken care of, and I've said that up front. But like you alluded to in your introduction, interestingly, this informal guidance letter also gives us some insights into what that Hamid family agreement looks like. Now, this is a proposed family agreement. This was done this was rather sort of sent into SEBI in 2014. Some months have passed since then, so I don't know if the final family agreement has gone through many changes. But here's what the proposed family agreement suggests: that the promoter group will will exercise votes in a coordinated fashion, that they will vote jointly as a single unit. It proposes that YK Hamid will supervise that joint voting. Upon his falling ill or his eventual death, then MK Hamid, his brother, will supervise voting. And after YK Hamid and MK Hamid, then the family member with the highest votes will supervise this joint voting. So it lays down the steps of this joint voting rather clearly. It also says that it has been proposed that there be preemptive rights in the case of any transfer of shares. This is fairly standard in most family agreements. It's what's known as a ROFA. So if any family member wants to sell, other family members will have a preemptive right to buy first. There are other interesting insights into the family agreement. For instance, YK Hamid's sister Sophie Ahmad is not yet part of the agreement but reserves her right to be part of the agreement. Then YK Hamid has gone on to name MK Hamid and Kamil Hamid, his nephew, as representatives or proxies for his 15.5% of vote in case he is not able to vote on that 15.5% himself. Similarly, MK Hamid has also named some proxies. We've had certain family members also allot proxy rights. For instance, Farida Hamid and Samina Wazir Ali have appointed YK Hamid as their proxy, and they own together a little over 7%. Other family members owning about 8% or so have appointed MKH as their proxy, that is MK Hamid. And this is sort of, in a sense, what the family agreement looks like at Sipla. Again, I'll stress, this is a proposed family agreement. It's from a few months ago. We don't know what the final one looks like or whether this will become the final one. But they asked SEBI for informal guidance, and SEBI has said, go ahead and do this. It will not trigger the takeover open offer. Takeover code open.
Well, the spoiler is the headline, isn't it, Minka? Thanks very much for joining us with the details on that one. But speaking of the markets, let's take a look at the action today. It was a tussle between the bulls and the bears on the Lal Street, with the Sensex and the Nifty opening the day with deep cracks. But the bulls did make a comeback in the middle before the bears plopped their way back into the markets, resulting in a flattish close. The Nifty managing to hold on to 8,300. The Sensex shutting shop about 27,400. And the one sector that bucked the trend today was the mid-cap index. What about the currency, Nandara?
Well, let's talk about the currency markets. Seem to be replicating the Indian markets, ending the day down just by 2 paise at 63.44 against the US dollar. The rupee, which began trading after a 4-day break, opened the day on a rather weak note but continued dollar selling by exporters and banks, ensured that the fall was kept in check.
Well, it's been a good fourth quarter for Kotak Mahindra Bank. The bank's net profit has come in ahead of street estimates, growing by 29%, coming in at 529 crores. Net interest income has grown 16% to 1,123 crores. On the asset quality front, the bank has improved, with gross NPAs coming in at 1.85%, while net NPAs stood at 0.92%.
We are also happy to report that our overall stress assets ratios have consistently improved. Gross NPAs, net NPAs, and on restructured assets, as you are aware, we are one of the lowest, or probably the lowest, in Indian banking industry.
And on that note, it's time for us to wrap up this edition of India Business Hour. Do stay tuned. We have all more news coming up for you right here.